Yeah. So because it's being recorded, I'll just go over the notation very quickly. Yes, Nathan.
So with regards to the last slide, I just wanted to make sure that I understand correctly that the weights and the bias, is there another set of weights and biases being happened in the nonlinear or the in F basically, or
No.
is it just that the weights and the bias are applied before and then a nonlinear is applied on it after that?
Yeah, the non-linearity is applied on Z. So the non-linearity is just a simple non-linear element by element non-linearity. So it takes in a number and outputs a number. There is no weight multiplication there. The weight multiplication happens in these intermediate things basically.
Yeah. Again, the nonlinearities could be anything like the sigmoids that we've seen, or softmax, or so on and so forth, right?
Yes.
The input to those is Z and not some Z and then weight afterwards. It's just the Z.
Yeah, it's just a Z. So basically you can do this without loss of generality, right? So the basic idea is that you have, so suppose you were to have like some weight in between, right? You can basically do the simple math. So if you want to have some weight in between, what you can actually do is you can club this weight with the previous weight, right? And you get like one matrix, because you can do matrix multiplication, and that will give you a single matrix, right? So even if you have multiple linearities stacked one after the other, those linearities can all be multiplied into one single weight matrix. That's why without loss of generality, that you have like one linearity followed by one non-linearity. Had there been no non-linearity, right, then it would just be one single giant linear model basically, right? Because what you are doing is that you have your input, right? You have your input and then you have your W1, right? Say you have your W1 followed by W2, right? There's nothing in between. There's no non-linearity, right? Followed by WK, followed by output. Then what you really have is that you have your output is nothing but WK multiplied by WK minus 1 multiplied by W1 times the input, right? And this entire matrix product can be kind of written down as this W times input, right? Because it's like matrix multiplication followed by matrix multiplication. So what makes it interesting actually is really the non-linearities, right? And that makes the function basically non-linear and harder. So it's recursive non-linearities that make this interesting. Okay, so as I promised, I'll just go over, because I started the recording late. I'll just go over the notation again very quickly. So L here is a number of layers, right? So you have the first layer followed by the Lth layer, right? And each layer, as we defined, is expressed as basically one kind of weight multiplication, right? Followed by a non-linearity. So F here is a non-linearity, right? Aj of L is the output of the jth neuron, right? So this is at layer L minus 1 or at layer L, this Aj corresponds to the output of the Lth layer, and Zj of L corresponds to the weighted input, right? So Z of L is actually equal to WL multiplied by AL minus 1 plus B. This is in matrix multiplication terms. So this is a matrix multiplied by a vector plus a vector, right? And finally, you have AL is equal to F of ZL, right? So F is the non-linearity. So examples of the non-linearity are the sigmoid and the rectified linear, right? And essentially what this means, this is a slightly complicated notation. So what this means is that each element over here, ALJ is equal to F of ZLJ, right? So you do this element by element. And typically these functions F are basically single element scalar functions like sigmoid of x, which is 1 over 1 plus e raised to minus x. Another is rectified linear, which is max of 0 comma x, right? These are two standard examples. You have a few more. You have something called tan h, which is actually used also, and things like that, right? So you have a lot of these layers that have been tried in deep learning literature. Okay, so now given this, right, let us try to see what's going on. So we can basically, what we are doing, right, is that we are trying to compute this gradient layer by layer, right? So we start with layer L, okay? and then we compute the gradient with respect to z, right? So z is a function, if you recall, right? So z is this weighted function of wl minus 1 plus bl, right? So the reason why we are taking this gradient with respect to zjl is because ultimately we want the gradient with respect to WL, right? So we'll first take the derivative with respect to Z, right? So this is the partial derivative, and this is because we are assuming this is a square loss, right? This is nothing but minus of yj minus ajl multiplied by the partial derivative of ajl divided by zjl, right? And now, again, like I said over here, that we assume that this function a is actually the sigmoid over here. If this is an arbitrary function f, then you just take the derivative with respect to f. Okay. So since this is a sigmoid, you can do this nothing. This becomes nothing but minus y minus a multiplied by the sigmoid multiplied by 1 minus sigmoid, right? So this is the gradient at the nth layer. Any questions on this? So just for completeness, right? Just for completeness, recall that C, right? For a given example, C of um, W comma B comma X, right? Was actually equal to um, Y minus A of W comma B comma X square. Right, so we'll assume that we had the squared loss as the final loss. If this is a general loss, then this gradient over here becomes this general loss. So because of the squared loss, this is y minus a multiplied by the gradient with respect to a. So that's why you have a minus sign here outside, right? So this term we are assuming is the gradient of J with respect to L. Okay, so now what we want to do is that we want to compute basically the gradient at the L minus 1th layer, assuming you know the gradient of the nth layer, right? So we start from the end. That's why it's back propagation. We are going backwards. Okay. So, and that's the reason in deep learning, right? It's called the forward pass and the backward pass. So you do a forward pass when you are actually, sorry, I just need to connect my charger actually. Um, yeah, so we do so we do a forward pass when we are actually computing the function value, right, or the loss value, and when we are computing the gradients, that time we need to actually run a backward pass, right? So the reason why we want to do a backward pass is because of this, is because we need to go in the backward direction to compute the gradient, right? So we start at the layer L, okay, and this is the gradient with respect to layer L. Now recursively, what we'll do is that using, assuming that you know the gradient at layer small l, can we compute the gradient at layer L minus 1, right? Okay, so here actually kind of explicitly we have derived the gradient with L minus 1, capital L minus 1, but the same thing will hold even with respect to small l minus 1, right? So you can use the same argument recursively, right? So we want to compute this term, assuming that you know essentially the gradient of A and the gradient of Z with respect to, so sorry, I think the gradient of with respect to Z, right? So assume that you know the gradient of, sorry, the gradient of C with respect to ZL. Okay, so this term, if you recall, was like delta L. Right. So the question is, can we compute delta L minus 1 if we know delta L? Okay. So, well, how do we compute this, right? So this is nothing but the gradient of um, layer, basically capital L, right? So this term we already saw, right? That this term, this is yj minus ajl multiplied by sigma of basically ajl divided by zj, right? And the reason why we have this sum over here is because the function recursively has this sum over basically j, right? So essentially this function at the L minus 1th layer, right? So I'll just come back. Yeah. So if you recall, right, Zj at the nth layer, right, is equal to this weighted sum uh, of al minus 1 plus bl, right? So you have this weighted sum over basically the previous layer. So yeah, so we have this expression, right? And then what we do is that we just substitute basically back the gradient with respect to, so basically you replace AJL with a sigmoid with respect to Z, right? And then we basically have this expression. So this is what we saw till last time, right? So this is minus y minus a multiplied by the two sigmoids, right? And then finally we have this derivative of ZJL with respect to the derivative of zkl minus 1, right? And this term zjl is a function of l minus 1 because of this expression, right? Substitute this back over here. So this is the gradient with respect to wjk prime l into al minus 1, right? Plus the bias term. And finally, we are taking the gradient with respect to z over here, right? So we we basically get this expression in the end. Okay, so here essentially what we have is that we have the gradient. We need to compute the gradient with respect to a k prime l minus 1 divided by the gradient of z k l minus 1, right? And since you're taking the gradient only with respect to, and there's a sum over here, right? But because you're taking the gradient with respect to a k term, it's a partial derivative, all the others will get cancelled. So the only term that will be left is actually the gradient of a with respect to k. Okay, so it's gradient of a k l minus 1 divided with respect to z k l minus 1, right? And we saw that, we know that a k l minus 1 is nothing but sigmoid of zkl minus 1, right? So this basically gives back this expression, and then if you substitute back, you get this as the gradient, right? So it's sigmoid multiplied by 1 minus sigmoid multiplied by w, right? So wjkl. So this expression, right? So what we have right now is that we have this delta L minus 1, right? So the partial derivative at the L minus 1th layer is nothing but this dot product between the partial derivative of the Lth layer multiplied by this weight matrix, right? Multiplied by this 1 minus sigma times sigma, right? So you can basically write this compactly in terms of this kind of matrix operations. Any questions? Yes, Nathan.
So the very top line of the slide, that's we were able to write that expression by. I mean, it's the exact same as what we had saw previously, right? When we were computing the derivative of like c, rather than with respect to. I'm just trying to understand how we got the first line in the first place.
Okay, so the first line basically is trying to express the function in terms of c, right, as this derivative with respect to a, basically. Does it make sense? So essentially the function c, right? So the function c is this sum over okay. So essentially so I'll just go back over here, right? Okay, so we are taking a single sample. So we have c is equal to half of y minus a multiplied by this, right? So we are starting with this expression, right? But then so we have the gradient of c with respect to z, right? So now what we want is that we want the gradient of c with respect to the previous with respect to the L minus 1th layer, right? So if you recall over here, okay, that the zj of L is this sum over k multiplied by WLJK multiplied by A, right? So we have this sum over k because we are taking a sum over all the weight elements. We are taking we're taking basically the sum of this over the kth row multiplied by each kind of activation. Right? So that's what is basically used over here in this expression.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Yeah, so it's just straightforward chain rule. Maybe you might want to just kind of expand this out a little bit to see what's going on, but it's just basically simple application of the chain rule actually. And just trying to write down the functions of basically write down the derivative with respect to the final loss function, right? In terms of these individual layers. Yeah. Okay, so essentially now thinking of like as I said, right, thinking of WL as this matrix, then what we can do, and this is how basically this is implemented today in like a lot of the deep learning libraries, right? So that's the reason why this is so efficient on a GPU, because you can kind of very easily write this as simple matrix multiplication and kind of element wise multiplications, right? So you can write this term, right, can be written as basically a multiplication of the gradient of L, right, a previous gradient multiplied by this weight matrix transpose, okay? And then you do this element-wise multiplication with 1 minus sigma of Z, right? So Z is the L minus 1 output, right? Multiplied by sigma of Z L minus 1 again. So these operations here, this is a Hadamard product, right? So these operations here are element-wise dot products. And this thing here is essentially a vector matrix product. Okay, so essentially what this means is that you can actually write this as WL if you kind of just switch the matrix, right? So WL multiplied by gradient L. Or like just to be call it WL transpose. So it depends on how you define WL, right? But you're multiplying this weight with this gradient, right? And then you're multiplying these two sigmoids, and that's how you get the gradient of with respect to L minus 1. So now this is with respect to the sigmoid, right? But imagine that you have an arbitrary function. Then essentially what we need to do here is that we need to take the partial derivative with respect to this arbitrary function, right? So this would be nothing but f prime of z l minus 1, which would be a vector, right? Because this would be, so essentially it's like the gradient. This is a gradient is a gradient of f with respect to z, right? Of z l minus 1. So it turns out that you can actually apply the same strategy to any arbitrary layer as well, right? So given the gradient of layer L plus 1, you can compute the gradient with respect to layer L in this recursive way, right? So we know the gradient at layer capital L, right? Using this, we can compute the gradient at layer L minus 1. Then using the gradient, we can compute the layer of, gradient at layer L minus 2 and so on and so forth, right? So this way we go back, and that's the reason again this is called back propagation. So we are kind of propagating the information behind. Okay, so now, so actually now you can kind of see the intuition of why we computed the gradient, these quantities, right, which is delta L. But we don't really care about delta L because delta L is the gradient with respect to the Z function, right? So the layer gradient is with respect to the output. But what we really want is we want the gradients with respect to each weight layer, right? So given the gradient at the Lth layer, we want to compute the gradients, basically given delta Lj, we want to compute the gradients with respect to Bjl and Wjkl, right? Because those are the parameters at layer L. So how do you do this? Well, you can do this again using the chain rule, right? And you can compute the gradient of the function c with respect to zjl, right? Multiplied by the gradient of zjl with respect to the gradient with respect to b. Right? So this is a simple, basically chain rule over here being applied. And this function, we know that zjl, right, is nothing but the function of sorry, so this is, yeah, this is nothing but WL, right, multiplied by AL minus 1, right? Or maybe another way to see this is that ZJL, sorry, this is not J, right? So this is the vector ZL. So you can write ZJL as essentially this sum over K, right? Sum over K of WLJK multiplied by AL minus 1J. Okay, so now given this, and actually there's a plus, yeah, so this is plus, so it is not L minus 1, this should be L plus BL. Okay, so this is the parameter of at layer L. So this is BLJ. Okay, so now you take the gradient, so you have the gradient with respect to C, right? This term over here is delta J, and you take the gradient of Z with respect to B, right? This term is 1. So that's why this you're left with delta JL, right? And now you want to take the gradient with respect to each parameter WJKL, right? So this term is nothing but gradient of C with respect to ZJL, and this is nothing but delta LJ, right? And now you have this term, right? And this term is actually going to be the kth component of this, right? So it's going to be AK of L minus 1. So actually, sorry, this is not, this is not, this is actually K. Yeah, so it's not J, it's K. So the gradient with respect to WJKL is nothing but AKL minus 1, right? So to summarize, maybe there was a lot of math, so I'll just go over the kind of high level intuition again, right? So what we are doing is that, again, remember this diagram, right? So we are starting from the Lth layer, we are starting from the very end, and we are trying to propagate backwards the gradient information, right? So we started with basically the last layer, and we took the gradient with respect to Z. Okay, and we defined this at every layer. We defined this as delta capital L, right? But at every layer L, we can define this as delta sup small L, right? So the question is that how do you go from layer L to layer L minus 1, right? So we go from this kind of quantity, right? So we kind of keep going down the chain of inequalities over here, and then we basically get delta L minus 1 as delta L transpose W, right, multiplied by this. And we saw that we can kind of easily write this as this matrix multiplication. Okay, and we can kind of similarly get this recursion at layer L. So once we compute these quantities delta L, we can actually get the derivatives with respect to B and with respect to W. Yes, Nathan.
So on the slide previous to the one we're currently on, I just want to make sure that the very bottom equation comes, so basically we're able to say logically that after the delta L minus 1 equals all this stuff on the top, that since we didn't really make any assumptions about what layer L was, that we can apply it to any layer.
Exactly. Yes. So the same math, the same steps of math. Here we only actually expanded out this gradient term, right? But essentially what you can notice is that leaving aside this, right, everything else, and actually this, because you're multiplying the weight, but this term is nothing but the gradient with respect to L. Okay, so actually maybe it was not necessary to kind of expand this out all the way, right? Because you can notice that here, like had this been any quantity, you can kind of basically write down the same set of math, right, to finally get that you're actually multiplying this with this delta L. So essentially what I'm saying is that this term is nothing but delta Lj, right? So without this having anything specific to the last layer, so the only thing that is specific to the last layer is this, right? Because with respect to the last layer, we are kind of using the fact that this is basically the L2 loss in the end, right? But the L2 loss is only in the end. Everywhere else we don't have the L2 loss, but the same equations will hold true. So you just have to assume that you know the gradient at layer L, right? And this is the only term that kind of comes in, and this comes in because of this, right? So from here you kind of get this because you're taking the gradient with respect to L, right? At layer you're computing this term essentially, right? So this term is the gradient of ZL with respect to ZL minus 1. And in order to do that, you need to expand ZL as a function of basically sum over K, WL JK prime multiplied by AK prime L minus 1 plus B, and then use the fact that A itself is a function of Z through the sigmoid, right? So using all of this, you will get this term over here, which is the blue that I circled. But the rest of the math will basically go through the same way for any arbitrary layer.
I also wanted to make sure that the well, still on the next slide.
Okay.
That those are supposed to be multiplication symbols, right? They're not. They're supposed to be multiplication symbols, the little open, yeah, those.
Yeah, so this is actually element-wise multiplication. So there are two kinds of multiplications, right? So one is matrix multiplication, right? So basically, kind of matrix multiplication is where you're doing W multiplied by X, right? So this is a matrix, this is a vector. So it's vector matrix multiplication. And then there is something else called X, basically, sorry. Okay, so actually, there is X dot Y, which is dot product, right? So this is nothing but sum over I, Xi, Yi, right? So this is a dot product. Then there is X circle Y, and this is a vector. And what this means is that the ith element is actually Xi, Yi. So you're doing an element-wise product of each term, one by one. So this is, the output of this is still a vector. Does it make sense? So basically each element, this is a vector, right? This is a vector, and this is a vector, right? And you are multiplying each element of this vector with these three quantities, essentially. So this is called the Hadamard product. Does it make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Okay, so this is backpropagation, right? So compute the inputs, outputs of each layer by starting at the input layer and applying the sigmoids function. So we compute delta L for the output, right? And this is what we get. And then starting at layer L minus 1 and working backwards, we use this recursion, right? And then we perform gradient descent. So this way now we have gotten these quantities, right? We have computed the gradient of at every layer L, right? So this we do for all L. So if you were to implement a deep learning algorithm from scratch, literally this is the only information you need to know, right? Of course, you need to know some GPU tricks to really get it to scale, right? But if you kind of just forget about scalability, you just think of it from a computational level, this is all you need to know, right? And this is literally how it is actually implemented. Of course, adding a lot of kind of systems level tricks that people do to make it like super fast. Bearing all of that, from a computation aspect, there is nothing more that is needed than this, right? All you need is that you have layer by layer, you do this kind of recursively, you compute this delta L, right, for every layer. So you compute delta L minus 1 until like delta 0 or delta 1, whatever, like however you start, right? So say you start with 1, then delta 1, right? So you compute all of this. And then given these gradients at every layer, right? All you need to do is just basically update the B matrix and the W matrix using gradient descent. That's it. So as you can see, computationally and actually from a theoretical perspective, right? A lot of this is very simple, but And like a lot of this was known actually even in the 1980s and the 1990s, right? So people had figured out the back propagation, and back propagation was known. But what people didn't know at that time is how to kind of club this efficiently with GPUs to make this super fast. Because as you can see, this is going to be very computationally expensive with like so many matrix multiplications going on, right? So that's the piece which actually led to a lot of the, the deep learning kind of, the way deep learning took off is really because of this. Of course, part of it is also the engineering effort of making kind of figuring out and getting it to work on real world problems, right? So that also took time, but it was not really something which was conceptually missing. It was just the engineering effort. Yeah, so I just want to kind of emphasize this because I think this is important to know the precedents and the history, right? Okay, so backpropagation, all backpropagation is doing is computing the gradients, right? So this is computing the gradients and then doing gradient descent, right? So because a deep learning function, loss function, because it's recursively defined, it is not convex, right? In the weights and the biases. So what this means is that all we can hope for is a local minima. We can't really hope for a global minima, right? And basically, yeah, so you want to run it several times with different initializations. This is relatively slow, but you can kind of speed this up significantly using GPUs, and that's why GPUs are really important for doing the fast matrix multiplication, right? I think what GPUs are really best at is matrix multiplication, and the whole reason why it's kind of basically kind of deep learning and GPUs go hand in glove, right? Because deep learning is really comprised heavily of matrix multiplications, and GPUs really are optimized for matrix multiplication, right? So, okay, so there's one more kind of variant of gradient descent, which is the momentum, right? And momentum basically uses like a past gradient information as well. I think we will cover momentum in like two lectures. Hopefully, if I have some time, I want to cover a little bit about some of these basically momentum and Adagrad and Adam kind of techniques at a high level. So I'll skip over this, but just FYI that there is basically this kind of momentum based algorithms as well. Okay, so again, right, since it's deep learning, there is a possibility of overfitting. And overfitting typically happens if you kind of run this for a very long time, right? So in deep learning, you probably at some point want to like stop learning and you don't want to have too many weight updates. So you like one common strategy that is used actually in deep learning is to look at the validation set error, right? So every epoch you compute the validation error, right? And make sure that the validation error does not go up after a point. So if it goes up, then we want to stop training at that point. So this is a common trick that is used. Again, this is I think another example of a training error and the validation error, right? So okay, so this is another kind of behavior that can happen. So that's why there is something I think like if you look at PyTorch, right? There is something called patience parameter or something. I forgot what exactly it means, but you don't necessarily want to just see that in the next epoch if the validation set is increasing, you stop, right? Because you can easily come up with scenarios like this, and this happens a lot, right? So you kind of the validation error goes down and then it goes up, right? But if you stop over here, this can actually be a very poor minima, right? That you have kind of come down to. So you let it go up a little bit, but then it will start coming down after a point, right? So the patience parameter basically waits a few epochs and make sure that this is not some kind of temporary bump that the validation error is just increasing, right? And but had the scenario been really like this where the validation set keeps going, error keeps going up, then maybe there is this basically this patience parameter, right? And after a point you see that the error is continuously going up sorry, and that's when you would stop. Any questions until now? Sorry. Okay. All right. So many ways to improve weight learning neural networks, right? So one is to use the regularizer. And obviously, as we have seen multiple times, the whole goal of regularization is to kind of prevent overfitting, probably better generalization, right? Other things is that as kind of as I alluded to, right? We looked at the computation for the square loss, but we can have any loss function, basically any loss function of y comma a of x comma w comma b, right? In particular, like one very common loss is the cross entropy loss. So you can probably do very similar kind of math with the cross entropy loss, right? And try to compute the gradient descent updates with cross entropy loss. Other things are kind of more clever initialization of weights. So like a lot of people have basically looked at this in deep learning, right? Another thing which is important is that the learning procedures can actually have a lot of numerical difficulties if there are a large number of layers. And a lot of this actually comes because of sigmoids. So that's the reason why there was this term which was introduced in sigmoids, right? Where basically the weights go down to zero very quickly. So if you have like particularly deep neural networks with multiple layers, right? What people were seeing is that the weights were going down to zero, and like a lot of the reason for this was because of the sigmoid, because sigmoid is a very kind of harsh nonlinearity. So lot of recent architectures, particularly like the deeper architectures, right? You look at like I don't know if you've heard of things like ResNets, like things things like Google Nets, etc., which have been used in computer vision. A lot of these neural networks actually don't use sigmoids anymore, and the main reason for this is because with sigmoids the gradients tend to become zero easily, right? And part of the reason is because at every layer, because you're kind of back propagating down, at every layer you have this 1 minus sigmoid, this term that gets multiplied at every layer if you have a sigmoid, right? And kind of recursively multiplying this quantity, what happens is that this quantity very sharply goes to zero, right? So if you write down the sigmoid, so I think I have this at somewhere, right? So if you kind of remember how a sigmoid looks like, yeah, so this is a sigmoid function, right? So a sigmoid function can very easily basically kind of saturate to either 1 or 0, right? So imagine you are multiplying the gradient with 1 minus sigmoid, right, multiplied by sigmoid. So imagine there are some quantities over here, but you're multiplying 1 minus sigmoid by sigmoid, right? This quantity is kind of very easily going to either it will go to 1 very quickly or it will go to 0, right? And this is exactly the behavior that people are finding with sigmoids, right? And that's why actually most deep learning models today use rectified linear non-linearity. Okay. Okay, so regularization, right? So you can regularize the weights basically at every layer, right? And you can still use back propagation because this regularization is like layer by layer, right? So you can do layer by layer regularization. You can also do L1 regularization to make it somewhat less, to make it sparse, etc., right? And basically lambda should be chosen with a validation set, right? So this is basically all standard. This we have seen even before. There is one more kind of heuristic that is used in deep learning. It's called dropouts. Okay, so dropouts is very reminiscent to what we have studied, basically bagging, right? Which is essentially the whole idea of bagging is bootstrap, right? So you sample with replacement, and that is exactly what is done over here, right? So the way this is applied is that you can randomly, so suppose you're doing a training, right? Then at any time in the training, you can randomly remove a certain percentage of the neurons from the network and only train on the remaining neurons. Okay. but you're doing this randomly. So what happens is that at any given at any given point or any given instance, you have a random set of neurons that are made to zero. So you don't update those parameters, but you update the rest. Okay, and this is, since it's applied randomly, it's not the case that those neurons are forgotten forever, right? It's just that at this particular epoch and this particular instance, we have kind of we are not taking these neurons into account, but then we are taking other neurons, and then those neurons could come up in the next instance, for example. And it turns out that, well, I mean, like if you were to do it with a full-fledged bagging approach, you would have like multiple neural networks, and you would need to keep these multiple neural networks in memory, right? But each neural network is very expensive to store, right? So from a memory perspective, it's not possible to store that many. So what we end up doing is we just do a kind of a simple statistical averaging, right? And the way what happens is that it just turns out that we can, just kind of modify the training by not considering these neurons and then considering these neurons at a later point, right? And then just essentially averaging out the behavior of the weights through epochs. And this is kind of like the equivalent of bagging in practice. Any questions on dropout? Yes.
So I just want to make sure I understood this correctly. The when it says randomly remove a percentage of the neurons, it really means to deactivate them and don't consider them in that training phase.
Yes.
But then in future phases, you might choose to include those.
Yes, yes. So basically, the neurons that we are not considering are like random, right? So what will happen is that when we have a fresh, when we basically come to the next epoch, right, we will be selecting a different random set of neurons, right? And there is like a certain parameter which is a dropout percentage. So it basically says that how much do we want to drop out. So typically this quantity is not large. Like this quantity is like we drop out like 10% or something like that, right? 10% to 20% or something like that. So we are not dropping out too many neurons. So that's the reason why those neurons would be applicable, could be active later on. Any other questions? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So some other techniques are early stopping. You will hear this a lot in deep learning community. What basically is kind of again a very simple idea. The idea here is that we stop learning early, right? So that we can prevent overfitting. And a lot of this is done with like looking at the validation set error, right? So we look at the validation set error and then we decide if we want to stop learning or not. Another notion is the notion of parameter time. So what we do in parameter time is that we basically say that certain sets of parameters are going to be the same value. Okay. So one example of parameter time is not exactly parameter time, but something like that is convolutional neural networks, because convolutional neural networks just apply a convolutional mask that basically gets multiplied every time and kind of it's moved around, right? So this significantly reduces the number of parameters. So what this does is that this kind of leads to significant compression in neural networks, and we don't need to store the entire weight matrix. Okay, so convolutional neural networks essentially, instead of the output of every neuron at layer L being used as the input to every neuron at layer L minus 1, edges between layers are chosen more locally, right? So this is particularly applicable for images, because you have an image, right? And each instance in an image is like a pixel, right? So what we are doing is that we have a local convolutional mask, and this local convolutional mask kind of moves around, right? And we just multiply, basically we just kind of average out this kind of local information over here and take it to the next layer, right? Similarly, you do this with this and you do it with this. So we have this kind of more local updates, and then that's why I was saying that this can be basically viewed as kind of parameter time. And oftentimes this is kind of combined with pooling layers. So we basically half the number of neurons by replacing small regions of neurons with their maximum output, right? So like instead of taking the average, you basically take the max. So it's called max pooling, okay? And this is more common for image, for like computer vision kind of problems, for image classification. Okay, so that's the end. I think this is the end of the neural network lecture. I think it took much longer than I expected. So